I think when we think of leaders, we think of people who are already at the top right now, your CEOs, people who manage, big corporations, that sort of thing. But you're very much of the opinion that actually we are all leaders. We all have leaders within us. You can tap into that at any moment. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a true believer that leadership is an innate ability of the heart, that it's not dependent on the title that you got at work or the badge that you wear at school. Yes, those are acknowledgements of potentially leadership that you do have, but I think the moment that we can engage and spark the leaders within everyone in the room, as long as we've got a mechanism that can manage it, there can be some real cool outcomes that really spark out of that. So even from when we were younger, what I don't think we do enough of is champion the different styles of leadership that can exist. We don't tell enough stories about the quiet leaders and the importance of the first follower. We tell all these stories about the loud leaders who have the capacity to yappa like me, but we don't tell enough stories about the people who sit in the back and still show leadership and create equitable outcomes, if we're going to go that angle. And I think, that could be a challenge to all of us, is how can we begin to champion the different styles of leadership that can exist, and then therefore when you see that leadership, you know that you can be that leader as well.
Georgia, what do you think it would mean for you, or what it would look like if there were more female leaders in the music industry?
Be amazing. It always takes the first person, in terms of like one person feeling confident enough to put themselves out there and go like, actually, I'm going to pursue this passion, or I'm going to, move into the space that may not have existed before. There's a lot of people that I know that do that already, are really brave and courageous and go, you know what, I'm really passionate about this. I'm really passionate about equipping people or leading this, group of people, or I want to start this. But I think if more women stood up and said like, hey, I've got something to offer, I'm really passionate about this, or I really see that there's a gap here, or I really see that there's a need for this group of people, and I can fill that need and be brave enough to say, hey, I'm going to do that, I'm going to learn and I'm going to grow, or I have been learning and I have been growing and I have a lot here to give. It takes one person to start that. And I think in terms of like, what would that mean? I think if there's if there are more women that do that and are willing to just put their foot in the cold water, there's a lot more that follow, because the rest of the, the females that are feeling a little bit nervous or like unsure go, oh, I've seen someone else do that. I can do that.
Yeah, can I build off of that? Yeah. I think there is also then a responsibility in us as a society to take the pressure off of the woman to have to do that. That's the part that I'm waiting for, is our tāne, our men, our allies in the room, like, you have a role to play in this as well. Because I think we talk about it as young women looking up to, or as women looking up to those who are already in positions, that we want them to take that move. But we also have to acknowledge that we all create the environment that allows that, which is everyone else in that room that has that little prickle in their throat when they hear something that's incorrect in that room, or that, when a promotion gets given to someone and it's like, oh, he only got it because, like, how do you, as an ally, if you're not a woman, sit in that room and use your privilege? That's my question, right? I want to relieve of us of having to step into that cold water on our own and go, who's with us as we begin to step into that cold water, and who's still going to be there when, I was about to say when stuff gets hard.
Yes.
Because it's cool, it's all good and well when we're here, when the good stuff rolls out. You want to come and be our champions then. But now I'm talking about in that moment where it's me versus the patriarchy. Like, are you going to sit with me and actually stand up for me, or are you going to sit there because it's comfortable and easy?
It's easy, yeah. I want to go back to you, Georgia. So, I grew up during the 90s, when all the sort of singers that I saw a lot of them were from America, and, it's like Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera.
With our Britney mics.
The OG Madonna mic.
So good.
Yeah. And, they're all over the magazines, tabloids, that sort of thing. But I would say, if I had to describe the way they came across, looking back at it now, everyone, all the women, all the female singers were hypersexualized. It was just all about looks, and it was wearing, very little clothing, like that sort of thing. Very much like a male gaze, that's what it felt like. And so I suppose for you, being a singer and sort of building your own brand, how much do you consider the way you look, and how did you decide this is what I'm going to be and this is how I'm going to present myself?
Yeah. Well, the weirdest thing is I am my brand in terms of like, you know, I'm not necessarily creating something that is aside from me. Like, I feel like who I am on stage is very much who I am off stage. What I wear on stage, I might not wear to the supermarket because that might be a little bit too much. But I feel like there's a real cohesiveness in terms of like the Georgia Lines brand. Like, I just feel like I'm completely being myself because that is all anyone is asking me to be. And that's been a massive like mental conversation for me in terms of like a shift in my mind of going, no one is asking you to be anyone else but you. And there is obviously external pressure that you may perceive, not that anyone's like asking you to dress in a certain way. Like, I've never had that. I've had a beautiful team of people who have always supported my vision, my creative direction, and have always like gotten in behind me. But of course you feel this external pressure of, am I doing the right thing? Am I, you know, building a brand that people are going to like? So if you remove all of that and go, well, why do I do what I do? I do what I do because I love it and I feel like I have something to say. And in terms of like visually and creatively what I do and how I create my videos and what I wear, like, it's just a natural extension of who I am as a person. I don't feel like I'm trying to like prove a point or trying to create this like wild brand that needs to fit in with this box. I literally am like, oh, I love that. I'm going to wear that. Like, great. So yeah, that's kind of been my conversation. It's just a natural extension, another arm of creativity in terms of visually and what I wear. Like, it just.
Do you think that that's something that's only happening now? Do you think it would have been different in the past?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm an independent artist, which means like I do everything without the help of a label. So I have to, you know, I have an amazing team of people. But, you know, when Brittany was around, she still is around, sorry Brittany, but, you know, in terms of like in the peak of the 90s when there was a lot of like the label side of things, that was how it was done. There was no streaming. It was album sales and record sales and playing shows, and, you know, a part of that of course was like how females were looking, and it's just this brand of this pop star. Whereas now I feel like the accessibility to artists, anyone can be an artist, anyone can create, can release music online, can put something on Spotify. Like, anyone can do that. There's an ease to that. The barriers are less of a barrier. Sure.
What advice would you give to, you know, for younger females who might want to be thinking about going into the industry? You know, what are some of the lessons that you've learned? You know, and do you talk to other musicians about this?
Yeah. I actually created a web series called Intros coming out of COVID because I felt like there was this massive gap of conversation with artists, and especially female non-binary artists, where, you know, you leave high school and you figure out that you want to do this as a job, and then you're kind of on your own. Like, there's no set pathway, and you have all these questions like, how do I know when to get a manager? How do I, you know, whatever the questions are, how do I get into festivals? How do I do funding? And I felt like there was this massive gap, and I was like, how do we fix that? Because there's a lot of things that I feel like I've had to navigate the last 9 years that I would love to try and create conversations around. So in terms of things that I've learnt, there's been a lot. I have really had to make friends with disappointment. I don't feel like you really get taught how to do that and how to navigate disappointment well. And, you know, I know I've talked a lot about mindset and having that conversation, the internal conversation. That has been a massive one for me, of going like, what is success? Like, what does it mean to be successful for you? And for me, that's longevity and sustainability with my career. So everything goes through that filter. And if you're filtering through like, in the long term, in 20, 30, 40 years' time, I want to be doing this still and have a family and be releasing music, everything becomes less stressful because you're not grabbing at every opportunity and panicking if something falls through and there's COVID and you can't play shows for 2 years, because you know, as much as that sucks and you have to reframe your thinking and you have to pivot and change everything and how you do releases and all of that stuff, you can't play shows. It's about the longevity of your career, so you have to be creative and figure out other ways of doing things. So creating your, like figuring out what is success to you was a massive conversation that was very different to when I was 17 to now when I'm 26. And learning that, like, not everything is detrimental. Like, it's okay to say no.
I want to come back to, you mentioned success there, I'll come back to that. But Arizona, you did your first TED Talk at the age of 18 about leadership. How much have you changed since then? And it's a big question, I know, but I guess, what did you think back then that you don't think now that's different?
Yeah, so I think firstly, like a lot of us hopefully have been 18 or are about to be 18 in our lifetime. And it goes without saying that we continue to evolve. That was just short of 10 years ago that young girl got up on stage and recited off a 10-minute, I think it was, TED Talk. It was about leadership, and it was about how she felt about leadership at that point in time, which, as I said earlier, she thought that leadership was an innate ability of the heart. It wasn't dependent on the badge. Now, for context, I had become the head girl of Epsom Girls Grammar back in Auckland that year, and I thought that the whole world was on my shoulders. I thought that every decision that I made, that I'd wake up tomorrow and someone would crucify me for the things that I thought. Now, the only reason I was made to feel that was because we sat in a school of 2,000 young girls who were just wanted the best outcomes for our school. So everything I did was wrong in someone's eyes, and everything I did was right in someone's eyes. So it was a baptism of fire into leadership at such a young age that actually, when I think about her now, I don't regret anything that she said up on that stage. I think she was the catalyst of who I get to be today. And it kind of speaks to the overall thing that I live by, which is that the actions that we take today impact the ancestor that we become tomorrow, right? So the actions that 18-year-old Zona took determined the story that gets told about my life to my kids and my grandkids, the kids that I will never meet, my generation that I will never meet. Those are the stories that will continue to be told. So I don't think there's anything that I don't believe was correct that she said back then, but I can tell you that year, I must have just turned 18. I sat at a laptop in the boarding, I was in boarding, my parents low-key loved me. So they sent me off to boarding school, love that. And I was sitting at the laptop, just like eagerly trying to write the speech the night before we got up on stage at TED. And I just remember thinking about that girl, because not a lot has changed in terms of the passion that she has for change. Not a lot has changed for the idea that she has about what makes a good leader in this world. But what I can say is now, 10 years later, she gets to sit back and actually go, hell yeah, like those 18-year-olds that are coming into our world now, they get to run a little further than I ever did when I was 18. They get to see themselves in leadership positions that I didn't get to see when I was 18. So I think we're all products of progress. But at the same time, we have to continue to tell those stories, share those stories in moments like this, so that they are marked in history. Otherwise, they're actually just blips in our lifetime. So yeah, for the time being, I don't regret anything she said. I think she was freaking smart. She was fierce, and she's kind of calmed down a bit. And equally, you know what? She was her mum's biggest nightmare. And that's the only thing I regret, is that actually sometimes mum is right when you are 18 and think you know everything. Yeah, mum, sorry for that. And I've had my moment with her at 23, and we're now closer to best friends.
Amazing. Okay, we've run out of time, so I have to finish actually 2 quick fire questions for you both. The first one is, what does success mean to you? And we'll start with that one. I'll go to you, Georgia.
Okay. For me, my idea of success is not like playing on a specific stage or playing to a certain amount of people. My idea of success is like being in a sustainable career. And it feels like a really lame thing to share with people, but it's something that I deeply deeply feel for myself of being like, this is successful. Like if I can be doing what I do and still love what I do when I'm 40, 50, 60, you know, and obviously that's going to morph and change and it's going to have ebbs and flows and looking different in different seasons of life. But I think sustainability is like a massive idea of success for me.
Yeah, success for me is knowing that I serve something bigger than myself. It is knowing that we get the opportunity to contribute to this moment in history and that we're not alone in that opportunity. So when I wake up and I go to sleep knowing that I've done something that contributes to that landscape, I just feel this like utter joy and pride just to be a member of this part of society. But equally, it's also a reminder of the responsibility we have to be creating change in this society, to be stepping up, speaking up, even when our voice shakes a little bit, even when we run to the toilet to cry and then our mum calls us and says, get back in there, your fight's not done, and you go back in and you go again. But just knowing that we get the opportunity to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, that's something that makes me very proud, not just as a woman, but as an Indigenous woman as well.
And finally, what's the piece of advice you'd give to your younger self to help them thrive in this world? No pressure.
It's okay to make mistakes. I was very much in terms of carried the world on my shoulders as well and felt like I had to be not perfect because I felt like I knew that no one could ever be perfect, but I carried that weight on my shoulders of you have to get it right, like you have to be strong, you have to make sure that you're on all the time and giving 250% all the time. I got to this point where I was like, actually, Georgia, you're allowed to get it wrong, and that's okay. Like, everybody gets it wrong, and actually it's a part of life. You're allowed to get it wrong. So I think I'd probably say to my younger self, chill out, it's all good, you're going to be okay, keep going, and like, please get it wrong.
Yeah. Mine would be, firstly, your mum's not as evil as you think she is. Second to that, it would be to be brave, and don't be fearful of that being brave. Actually, you're nervous because you care about it. You're nervous because you're passionate about that outcome. So be brave. Don't be afraid to be brave, and make sure you take everyone with you, because it's fun to go on your own, but shucks, it's progress to go together.
Yeah.
And so she's a little fighter, but just probably don't fight mum and stop letting dad off the hook.
Amazing. Thank you for all your insights.
Thanks.
Stories.